answers to those questions.
Mayor, you're muted.
On the let me start on the I-225 incident. I watched in the last protest on the 27th of June, the Aurora Police Department secure all the on ramps to I-225, and no vehicles I think approached the protesters. But this time we had a vehicle approach the protesters. Can you go over again how that happened?
So we're still trying to determine exactly where the turquoise Jeep was able to enter the highway. Again, there was a chance that there were some vehicles already on the highway when the protest went onto the highway. So we're not sure if the vehicle was already on the highway or if it entered at Alameda or entered at some other location. So we're still trying to determine exactly where the turquoise Jeep entered the 225.
Okay, and then when the police pulled back, when they were able to push the protesters out of the quadrangle or whatever you want to call it, and when the protesters were then tearing down the plywood and destroying the windows, can you go over again why they did not intervene in that particular situation?
So again, that all happened very quickly. So again, they had just broken down the gate, and so then, so I think very quickly we had they moved to destroying that, and so again, part of that decision making is to determine, sort of the safety of those involved, and determining what is the best approach to deal with the situation. So sort of it's kind of a decision in the moment as to whether or not we're going to intervene and what level of force we would use to intervene. So at that point, even though they were breaking the windows and things like that, I think our first initial response was to make sure that we secured the municipal court and we did not have any actual incursions into the building. And then from there, again, those windows were all broken in relatively short order, unfortunately. So once we secured the court and determined that was secure, they had fallen back at that point, and again had sort of formed a shield wall again in the center of the Great Lawn.
What do you mean by safety? The safety of the officers, safety of the protesters, safety of whom?
The safety of everyone involved. So both officers, safety of those involved in that. So again, part of our experience from the June incident was that, we are told that there are peaceful protesters. And so we, again, want to make sure that we are giving folks lots of time to disperse. We issued the dispersal orders and want to make sure that the safety of all involved is taken into consideration.
Further questions from the members?
Yes, Mayor. Jason, thank you. Jason, how are y'all getting intel when these things are actually in motion? The reason I ask is there were ample live streams that were available, and I'm just wondering if PD was monitoring those, where you had people openly talking about, setting crap on fire and, trying to burn down the courthouse, basically. And I'm wondering why, because that happened,
we're monitoring all.
Okay. Because that happened several minutes before the charge happened. So I was just curious as to, okay, so there was just a decision made.
Unfortunately, we've again, as we've told council in the past, we've heard that talk before, and we'd heard that talk on the 27th. And again, part of that was that, we're told that officer presence escalates these things. And so again, there's a decision that the direction we think we've heard from council and others is that that's just talk. So we allowed them to, sort of hear that. We monitor those sources, and again, we prepare for different contingencies. But until some of these things come to fruition, it is again, part of that is an understanding of trying to be very measured in our response.
Further discussion. Questions?
Mayor, Berzins?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. First of all, Jason, there is some sort of feed. I was watching Saturday night from a drone, and I don't know whose drone it was, but it was over 225, and it showed numerous cars around Alameda and 225. So I don't know if you have that. You probably do. But they were on 225, and the Jeep wasn't the only one. So you might look for that if you don't already have it. Another question is, did the planners for this, the socialists and what is it, Liberation Army or whatever they are, did they give you a plan of what they were going to do?
They did not.
Well, Tay Anderson was on Dan Kaplis this afternoon, and he said Aurora police knew exactly their plan, where they were going to go. They were going to be on 225, and you did nothing to stop it. So maybe you need to go back and get that tape too, because he had a totally different story of the 225 incident and the gun incident and all like that.
They did not reach out, and again, as I had indicated before, even if they did, we would have to be very suspect of any information they've provided. They have deliberately misled both the public and the city in the past as to their intentions, specifically referencing the surrounding of the District 1 facility.
Okay, thank you. I just wanted to let you know that there was a drone somewhere, and Tay Anderson had said this on the radio today. Actually, Mayor, he followed you right after you got off the radio, then he was on the radio, and he just totally contradicted everything that we've heard. So that's all I have for now.
Very well. Further discussion, questions?
Mayor?
Councilmember Coombs.
So in the streams that I was looking at, this destruction occurred after the protest organizers was directing folks to disperse. And so I'm wondering, in terms of kind of delineating between the folks that are organizing a peaceful protest and the folks that are agitating, and this is kind of similar to questions that I've asked in the past, how is intelligence being collected and how is intelligence operating around that and around trying to focus on and contain folks that are clearly intent on causing damage and inciting rioting versus folks that are trying to peacefully protest?
I think it is extremely difficult. The situation is very fluid. I think as we've hopefully indicated in the past, including the violin vigil, that clearly there was a large number of people at both the violin vigil and this that wanted to peacefully assemble and exercise their rights. We do our best to provide a safe environment for that. We've talked a little bit about our posture. Certainly this one, we had a much less visible posture after discussions with both council and others after that violent protest. So again, but I think this has been our concern all along, that there are elements within any protest that can try and attempt to agitate and escalate things to violence. And so it is a very difficult line to draw, and I certainly think that there are innocent bystanders that can get drawn into very dangerous situations. And so it's something that, again, as we talked about, a use of force from the police department, it is something that has to enter into that discussion and can lead to, again, very dangerous situations as we witnessed on Saturday. We had a very reckless discharge of a firearm at a moving vehicle into a crowd. That is extremely concerning. So when you start introducing firearms and agitators into a crowd, and then you then add into it the cover of darkness, it is a very, very volatile situation.
Mr. Bachelor, I think what we understand, what we can see is the pattern here. And let me just say that in discussions with Interim Chief Vanessa Wilson, even before the incident, the protest on the 27th of June, she informed me that the strategy all along was not to have a visible presence of the police because it incites those elements of the crowd that are prone to danger or that are prone to violence, that are there to have a confrontation with the police. So I certainly get that part. I think that it's very difficult, and I don't want to, I'm a Monday morning quarterback here, and I've been a combat leader, and I know that decisions are very difficult to make in the fog of war, and you have the intelligence, the information that is never 100% accurate. It always is, maybe afterwards. You can see a clear picture, but you don't necessarily see a clear picture when you're on the ground making decisions in the middle of a fight. But I think we're going to have discussions in executive sessions, not to share strategy with the opposition as to how better we can defend public property, and that's not a discussion I think to have here, because I think tactics are a sensitive issue. Strategy is a sensitive issue that I think is worthy of executive session. Is there further questions or comments?
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
All right, so Jason, I want to go over some of these points again because we've received a lot of information from the public and a lot of comments from the public. So first off, the meeting was organized by the Party of Socialism and Liberation. Is that correct?
They were one of the organizers.
Was Black Lives Matter an organization, a part of it, or?
Let me pull up my notes here in terms of. I believe we have Aurora Cop Watch, the Frontline Party for Revolutionary Action, and as well as a couple of others.
So we had the socialists, we had the revolutionaries, but we didn't have what would normally be, Black Lives Matter. I think everybody would agree is a peaceful organization. The revolutionary organizations, kind of by definition, something that you may want to spend more time considering. The other question, you had brought this up before, but I want to make sure. You had talked about the rioters being embedded inside the peaceful protesters. Were they embedded? So let me make sure I get this right. Did the rioters show up after the folks came back from the march, or were they during the march, or were they with the group before the march? In other words, were they participating throughout the day with the protesters?
They were participating throughout the day, to include probing and scouting the site the entire day.
And these were the guys walking around with the black bathing suit or jumpsuits on, and the helmets and the masks, as well as carrying AR-15s, loaded weapons, and demonstrating that they were acting as a threat.
Yes.
Okay, and that's what I thought. And they were also, and again, you had mentioned that the same group was at the police station when they brought in the gas to light the building on fire, and the same group was at the vigil, the violin vigil, where Elijah McClain was being honored. Is that correct?
Correct. So
the fundamental difference in tactics this time was that instead of the police coming out using their pepper gas and using rubber bullets to disperse them, because they said that they would not do the damage, and they said that if the police had not engaged at the police station, or they didn't engage at the police station, but at the violent vigil, they said the only cause for that was because of Elijah McClain, or I'm sorry, because the police showed up in their gear. Is that correct?
That is correct. We were told afterwards, both in discussions with council and others, that it was the police presence that agitated that situation.
Okay, now council received an email earlier today from a person who was there in a truck. He was with his wife and daughter. He was approached. He was not verbally assaulted. His family feared for their lives. The wife cried for over an hour afterwards. Do you remember seeing that email?
I do.
Okay, and so is it possible? And then looking at the videos, I saw an older white Lexus with 15 people on it, pushing down on it, and that person backed up to try to get away. I don't know whether you saw that or not, but there are a number of videos where the protesters were harassing, intimidating, and scaring the bejesus out of the people on the street. Did you see any of those?
Yes, we've seen some of those videos, and again, it was a very certainly after the Jeep drove through and shots were fired. It was obviously a very tense situation on 225.
All right. So again, talking about the turquoise Jeep, the story has been out, and I guess the Party of Socialism and Liberation has put the story out that the Jeep was intending to kill people. How many people are you aware of that the turquoise Jeep hit?
We're not aware of any injuries from
the Jeep. So given the letter that council received today, given the video that we've seen about the people being intimidated and scared for their lives, I'm not going to make you answer the question, but I'll essentially say that there's a very high probability that the people could have approached this Jeep. The reaction between the Jeep, people in the Jeep and people outside the Jeep went very badly, and then the Jeep fled for the drivers of the Jeep fled for their lives. Having said that, when the Jeep started to take off, as you mentioned, someone pulled out a weapon, fired off at least 6 rounds. I wanted to ask you, listening to the video, I heard the first 6 rounds going off, where they were wildly being shot by, I don't know what the guy was thinking. Obviously, he doesn't have a weapons license, because they teach you, the first thing they teach you when you're firing a weapon is to understand what's around and what you could possibly hit. So that person fired off 6 rounds. He hit a woman in the leg. He intimidated that other lady, so she jumped off the wall. But then the other, a shot grazed the side of a head of a person. So a 1/4 inch difference, and that person would be dead and murdered by one of the people who fired. And again, whether it's murder or manslaughter, the fact is that if you fire a weapon into a crowd, you're responsible for every person that's hit. So that person who fired the 6, we know hit the Jeep at least once in the tire. I thought there was another shot in the side, but then he shot 2 and maybe 3 people, if that third report is accurate. Is that the way you understand?
We understand he fired a number of rounds. We're again asking the public to help us with, if there's any eyewitnesses or other things like that that can help us identify this. We want to put together all the evidence that we can to try and identify this person, and then again, all of that evidence and information will be turned over to the district attorney's office.
Okay, so again, going to the conclusion of this, you were talking about the different tactics, and again, as I mentioned earlier, the fact that the police engaged during a violin vigil was accused as the cause of the violence. In this case, how many rubber bullets did the Aurora Police Department fire? The Nerf ball bullets?
None. The police department did not utilize any less lethal munitions.
Okay, and then as far as pepper spray, how much pepper spray did the Aurora Police Department deploy in this case?
Again, the department did not deploy any less lethal munitions.
Okay, and I understand those windows, about 23 were broken. I understand they're in the $4,000 range. Council's going to have to come up with that. Do you have any idea at this time as an estimate as to what that the total damage was?
We do not have a damage estimate at this point.
But it'll be in the hundreds of thousands of dollars plus the overtime.
There will be significant costs associated with the event.
The most important question is that now that they've demonstrated that these rioters have demonstrated that they embed themselves in the protest in Aurora, we've seen it multiple times now. I'm wondering, and again, we'll talk, as the mayor said, we'll talk about this later, but should we ever assume that these rioters aren't going to be there? And should we ever assume that they're not going to try to damage and burn our city buildings down?
Mr. Batchelor? It seems like there is a pattern where these protests are increasingly violent. So we get the protest on the 27th of June, over 1,000 people show up, 950 plus, very respectful, listening to music, violin music, listening to speakers, and you have about 50 agitators in the group. But at the end of the day, it's not as aggressive. There's almost no damage to the Aurora Municipal Complex. Obviously, the tactics the police chief said maybe they did not work in the sense of that she thought she could separate the 50 from the 950 plus, and that, particularly from a PR standpoint, didn't go over with, and didn't go over with in terms of a positive strategy. But in this protest, you're saying the number is about 500. On your first report, it was 600, so let's just say 500 plus people show up. And instead of 50, it's about, you're saying 150 to 200 of that group are seeking confrontation with the police and there to destroy property, and we're much more aggressive than in the first protest, and did have a confrontation with the police. Obviously, we took another different strategy in the second protest by not using any non-lethal munitions. And my concern is there is going to be, and we'll discuss this in executive session because it'll be sensitive as to what the specific tactics are. But on August 23rd, I believe there's going to be another protest, and this one will be, I believe, very large and potentially very aggressive. And I just think we're going to need to rethink our strategy in how to strike the balance between appropriate force and protecting public property. And so, and I know that that's going to be a discussion for another day, but let me tell you, if the police had not been inside the building to secure the building, they would have burned that building down, the courthouse. And as I've said publicly, we are not Portland, and we will not become Portland. Is a further discussion.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Coombs.
So I just want to back up to the discussion of what was going on with the Jeep. It's been made clear that there is not corroboration of the claim that the Jeep was being surrounded. And if you actually look at the video, that person was speeding toward the crowd at high speeds. There was not an opportunity for that crowd to be surrounding that Jeep. And so I think trying to claim that a car hurtling toward a crowd of people is acceptable for any reason is distressing and disrespectful to the lives of all. Excuse me, I am speaking.
Councilmember Coombs has the floor.
So, it's basically disrespectful to the lives of those people. That person who fired off that gun is foolish, and you're right. They clearly did not know how to use their weapon safely. And you laid out clearly, you don't fire into a crowd, period, and you don't fire when whatever is going to be behind you or behind what you're shooting is something you don't want to hit. And presumably a crowd of people is something you don't want to hit. So that notwithstanding, that person was flying toward that crowd before the shots were ever fired. And so I think we should not be blaming people who were nearly run down by a vehicle for the fact that that vehicle was trying to run them down.
Further discussion.
Yes, Mayor.
Councilmember Marcano.
Thank you. I actually was going to ask a follow-up regarding that
Please.
Jeep. I know there's other investigations underway. Jason, is that part of the investigation?
It is. That's again, I would reiterate our calls for if anybody has eyewitness accounts, as has been discussed, we have sort of the general news feed from, I think, one of the helicopters that sort of, picked it up after it was sort of driving through the crowd. We don't, I think, have good video or eyewitness accounts of what happened leading up to that. We've certainly read some of the newspaper accounts. I think what we would hope is that those people can reach out directly. We need those eyewitness accounts so that we can gather all of the evidence and, again, turn that over to the district attorney for the appropriate charging decisions.
Okay. I just want to note for the record, I linked into chat a video that came out earlier today that I believe is now on the Sentinel's website that demonstrates, I think, 6 different angles of the Jeep speeding towards protesters. You can hear the revving of the engine, and you can also hear the impact when the gentleman who drives the white truck pulls out to intercede. And then there are a bunch of eyewitnesses who have apparently corroborated those events, including the gentleman himself, who have said that if he had not done that, that car would have continued to accelerate and run over. I don't want to know how many folks who were in front. So just, it's in the chat if you could take a look at that. Thank you.
We'll certainly pass that on. Again, I think we've been very fortunate that we've seen a very good response to the call for eyewitness and accounts, and so we may already have that evidence in those eyewitness statements. But if there's anybody else that has not, we would certainly love them to reach out to the police department so we can gather all of that evidence. And so both driving a vehicle through a crowd and firing a gun are extremely disturbing and dangerous events. And so we do need any evidence we can get so we can pursue the appropriate charges related to those incidents.
Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. Yeah, I guess I just wanted to point out the part that was missing in the earlier narrative around the white truck, right? And somebody, an average citizen of our community perceiving the threat, wasn't part of the protest, but perceived the threat of this Jeep driving towards and in high speeds towards a mass of people, towards these peaceful protesters, right? We can talk about whether you agree they should have been there, but I'm disappointed that we haven't. We talked about destruction of personal property and public property, but we haven't talked about the risk that those protesters experienced, right? And the conversation around, I mean, does their safety matter as well? We're talking about not necessarily knowing all of the facts in the situation, and I encourage the public to submit any personal video so that we can also make the most informed decision, right? We only have as much information as we have access to. We have plenty of eyewitness testimony for the folks as well. Encourage folks to, again, communicate with our community. But I'm disappointed that we haven't talked about the fact that those people's lives were at risk, and that this person did perceive that danger. Again, average person could see that was a potential dangerous situation and reacted, right? We could throw out hypotheticals that people were protecting themselves. I don't agree with the method of randomly discharging a weapon into a crowd by any means. But if we're talking about intent, you could make that argument. And so I think we have to introduce that to the public and talk about that holistically and not cherry pick facts that we're going to include in a narrative. So, anybody who watches a video, and I would encourage you to watch the video that Councilmember Marcano included as well to see that.
Further discussion.
Mayor Dave Gruber.
Councilmember Gruber.
Okay, while we're talking about this, I think it's important to note that the truck that hit the Jeep was part of the protest. It wasn't an independent. Again, we don't have, as far as I know, we don't have any other than a statement of the Jeep driver. We don't know what the intimidation was. We do know that there's severe intimidation on other people. And then I think there's 2 other points to keep in mind. Number one, while the Jeep was speeding away, while he was getting shot, while things were being thrown at the Jeep was traveling at a high rate of speed. Well, wait a minute. First off, we're talking people that had no right to be on the highway. This is a federal highway. It's against the law to walk on the highway. So when you talk about the safety of people walking around a highway where the speed limit is 65 plus, by definition, there is no safety. They are in the wrong. The people that went there are in the wrong. And the second thing is the Jeep was blowing its horn. And if the Jeep did intend to kill somebody or did intend to hit somebody, they did not. And then the final thing is that the thing that Jeep did at the end of it was to drive to a police officer and ask for help. So this doesn't sound like a mass murderer. This sounds, and again, we'll find the evidence and we'll see what that evidence looks like. I know how it's been painted by the media. I know how it's been painted by the Party of Socialism and Liberation, but we'll see what the evidence is. But I can tell you that blowing your horn, going fast while people are shooting at you, making sure that you don't hit anybody and that 0 people are actually hit, and then ending up at a police officer and saying, please protect me, is not the sign of a serial killer.
Mayor?
Further discussion, Councilmember Murillo.
Yeah, to that point, I read some of the comments on the Sentinel article, and the driver himself had commented, and what he said is that there was a barricade that the police had put up, actually, and somehow this person made it around that. That doesn't sound like they're fleeing from anything. So I think, again, being clear on the facts about what happened and protecting everybody involved. I don't condone, randomly discharging. I don't know what their intent was, so I can't comment on that. I can comment on what the sequence of events were. I wasn't at the event, so I'm also left with putting pieces together based on, bits and pieces of what's happening. But yeah, I can't, based on my understanding of the facts, going around a barricade somehow and then going through, and otherwise it was empty towards a group of people doesn't sound like protection in by any means.
Further discussion.
Persons?
Councilmember Berzins.
Thank you. Thank you. Like Councilmember Murillo said, the fact we have some facts still yet to come out, so I would suggest that we not banter back and forth until we get all the facts. If the Jeep was there, went around the barrier, did the white truck, I don't know. We still have a lot to figure out. What I wanted to say was I wanted to thank the Aurora Police Department. I think you did a wonderful job. You kept everything, all the people safe. What happened on the highway had nothing to do with the Aurora Police Department. That was two different things. It was a Jeep and a shooter and a lady that jumped or fell off or whatever. That had nothing to do with the police. But when those things did happen, who did they call? They called the police to come help. And I want to say thank you to them. They went in, they did their job. We still have information to get as to how they handled the courthouse the way they did. And we'll find that out in the near future, I'm sure. But in the meantime, our ladies and our men worked hard and they kept anyone from getting hurt. And I want to say thank you to them.
Further discussion. Seeing none, meeting adjourned.
Mayor.
Councilmember Murillo.
Sorry, I wanted to, there was a discussion of potentially calling a special study session that I believe you were going to request.
Well, this is I believe this is it. This was the presentation by the police department.
I'm sorry, this was related to the breed specific legislation that the Horns Committee was interested in discussing with the larger council.
I'm sorry. Could staff comment, please?
Yeah, Councilmember Murillo and Mayor Kaufman, we haven't yet had a chance to talk with Mayor Kaufman about this. What Councilmember Murillo is referring to is having a special meeting on August 10th to discuss, to do like a town hall, I believe, on the proposal for breed-specific language.
Okay.
Berta's here too, and we can certainly discuss that. To call a special study session, or it'd actually be a special meeting to take comment, we would need 6 council members or the mayor to call that meeting. There's still time, for that to happen. So we don't have to decide tonight, but to Council Murillo's point, she just wanted to make that public in a public meeting, and that's why she's bringing it up tonight.
Well, let me tell you, I would love to deal with this issue. I wonder if we could delay it just a little bit, given all that's going on right now. But there certainly could be 6 votes here for the special study session, and that would be appropriate to move it forward. Councilmember Murillo.
Thank you. My apologies, Mayor. I assumed that you had prior knowledge of that, so my apologies.
No.
And thank you, City Clerk Ruger, for that explanation. Just quickly, you know, 2 things. If we don't vote on or give a direction on that today, when would be the next opportunity? Is my next question, or my first question. And then I have some comments related to some of the public feedback we've gotten.
On August 3rd, I believe. Is that correct? City Clerk would be the next opportunity.
Councilmember Murillo and Mayor Kaufman, yes. In fact, on the August 3rd study session, we will have this item for discussion. So you all can decide that night if you want to call a meeting on the 10th, and we can advertise it certainly, you know, with well advanced notice that the public can give their comments to the council. So that would put you.
Okay. Very well. Can we delay till the 3rd of August, Councilmember Murillo?